Hello there, it's Alana. This episode is the last one of the season. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in over the last year. Untangled has evolved quite dramatically over this time, but I hope the conversations are still serving you and filling you up with life-altering, perspective-shifting ideas and wisdom on how to live your own version of an untangled life. Untangled and I will be back for season 4 in March 2018. Can't wait.
I'm wanting to spend less time at Harvard and more time at Grandma's house because I think that Harvard and the scientific Western tradition has gotten us into this mess that humanity is in. No offense, but that's how it happened. And I think that my people's traditions are valuable, they're not disposable, they're not inferior, and that they have the power and the potential to get humanity out of this mess. And so I've kind of turned a 180 and restored my faith in my people, in my ancestors, and in my traditional institutions.
The influence of the capitalist system on our spirits. This was a theme of discussion I proposed to Lyla June Johnston when we began our interview. You see, Lyla June's story is quite different from those we've heard previously, believing that capitalism is the root of destruction of the earth and the people. She's lived a series of life experiments, consciously weaving in and out of the capitalist system with an ultimate goal to change that very system. Life experiment number 1, Lyla chooses not to be part of the capitalist system, and for 3 years she practices what she calls fearless generosity, giving away her work and gifts in a selfless act for the betterment of her people. Life experiment number 2, she enters the corporate world, this time with the goal to change the system from the inside. Life experiment number 3, she decides to build her own system, returning to her traditional institutions and working with Dene peoples to create and sustain their own education systems free of white colonial fetters. In addition to Lyla's very unique personal story, you'll also hear her talk about the role Indigenous cultures and traditions play in helping Western societies rebuild social systems and models for a more sustainable world, putting women at the root to create stable societies, and stories highlighting the treatment and historical events of the Dene people. I'm Alana Helbig, and you're listening to Untangled. So Lyla, thank you so much for joining me on Untangled. I feel that it's fitting that you just had your master's thesis defense today, actually. I thought that we might start here with you telling us a little bit about your thesis.
Well, it's been a long time coming. I'm doing graduate studies at the University of New Mexico, which is in the southwest deserts of what is now called the United States of America, but has much older names than that. It kind of started out when I was indoctrinated into the Western form of schooling as a young Native woman. My grandparents both went to a boarding school where they were taught that their Native American culture was inferior and invaluable. And so they started to try and be as Western as possible. They taught my mother to be the same and taught me to be the same. And not only did my family have that influence, but just all of society all around me was saying that my worth was valued according to these Western standards of education, and that the place to be was in these Ivy League universities, all the while devaluing my ancestors' education system and my ancestors' language. The Nebazad is our language, and putting a higher value on English, which is causing our language to go extinct. Long story short, my thesis is in, the title of it is Denebenantiendo Oho Ah, Education for Us, by Us, a collective journey in Dene education liberation. It's sort of hard to describe in a few minutes, but the overview is that we were trying to create a space where the people could teach and learn anything they wanted. And this is very special in the Navajo, or Dene as we call ourselves, context, because 150 years ago, almost to the day, our people were imprisoned in a concentration camp. And while they were in this camp, they were starved, they were beaten, they were systematically raped, and 7,000 people died in this concentration camp. And Hitler would later study this American concentration camp for Dene people because it was so effective at dehumanizing the people. The 2,000 people who survived after 7,000 people perished in this camp, these 2,000 survivors were allowed to go back home. They were allowed to leave the camp on a set of conditions according to a peace treaty, as it were, although it wasn't peaceful at all. And one of the articles in this treaty, this agreement, said, we will let you out of this prison, is basically what it said, if and only if you compel every one of your children from ages 6 to 16 to attend boarding schools provided by the United States government where they will have a proper English education. Basically, at this time, you're having Dene people disallowed from teaching and learning the way they want to teach and learn. And they're being literally forced into these schools at gunpoint. It's like, you either stay in jail or you give us your kids, so, and all the while they are actually disenfranchising our people's knowledge, saying it's so worthless that you are not even fit to educate your own children. We are going to do that better than you can. And we see where that's gotten us. Nowhere at all. So anyways, giving about 30 Dene people this space where I asked them, if you could teach and learn anything you wanted, what would it be? Like a completely wide open question. And what they decided was they wanted to teach a summer school that was 4 levels to honor the 4 worlds of our creation story from which we came into this 4th world. And that each of these worlds had a different theme. And the first world was prayer, philosophy, and kinship, and botany. The second world was traditional foods, land restoration, and indigenous permaculture techniques. The third world was sheepskin tanning, shoemaking, moccasin making, weaving. And the fourth world was architecture, traditional architecture. And we built a traditional home from the ground up, and over 100 Dene people came to build this hogan, as we call it. This beautiful thing transpired, and so my thesis is essentially an autoethnography where I'm tracing my journey with these Dene people to create our own school under our own terms for our own purposes, which is why the title is Education for Us, by Us. And so it was just a beautiful manifestation of the people's truest desires. I was also studying how we teach, because it wasn't just about what we taught, but how do we teach when we are given that freedom? It was really clear that our teachings are communal, they're synergistic in the sense that we invite other teachers to give their thoughts. It's not like, oh, I'm the teacher and I'm the single authority. And there's also another aspect of our education is that it's very ceremonial. There's a lot of prayer involved. It's very hands-on and experiential. It's outdoor. 8 out of 10 classes that these people taught were outdoor. It's ecological focused. It's self-sufficiency focused. I could go on and on. But it was a very unconventional blossoming of pedagogy that I had never seen before. How practical it is and how in touch with the world around us and the seasons and the elders and the plants and animals and with each other. There was a moment where we were doing the sheepskin tanning lesson, which basically creates this nice, fluffy, clean, beautiful mattress. And it's so soft, and the sheep are like our mothers, they hold us. We had like 8 Dene students all working together on the same project. And I was like, wow, how different is this? Normally when you learn, you're in your own desk, you're writing your own paper, You're responsible for your own success.
You're staring at a white wall with, a white
in
book.
A fluorescent lit room.
Yeah.
But this project, people were working together. And so this education actually brought us closer to each other and helped us be more community minded, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it really makes sense. A focus on learning through connection. This is, one of the reasons why I was saying to you at the start of this call that I want Untangled to be a storytelling podcast, because it creates that connection, which I think we are missing. And this is just you highlighting that from a really early age, we're taught to disconnect from each other, from our environment, from the wisdom of the people that have come before us. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah,
you're right, aren't you? Because in Western academia, it's all about the newest study and the newest cutting edge, right? There is a little bit of devaluing of our elders and what they have come to know. That's interesting. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. I'd love to give the listeners just a little bit more of an insight behind your journey, because you have had quite an interesting one. There was a time where you consciously chose to stay out of the corporate capitalist system. Do you want to take us to that time?
I was having a really hard time in college at Stanford. I was having a really all of the wounds that I had accumulated over the years and that I tried to suppress or pretend like it didn't hurt or it was normal. I couldn't deny them anymore, and so it was all coming to a head. The drug addiction, the abuse I had experienced as a kid, as a teenager, mainly the kind of abuse women shouldn't experience, and all kinds of different insecurities based on those traumas were kind of coming to a head. And then I broke my pelvis and my spine my junior year of college in an earthquake. So it just kind of everything just came crashing down. At this point, I prayed for sobriety because the drug addiction and the alcohol addiction was so present in my life that I thought I might pass away if I didn't figure out a way to get free. So that sent me on a healing journey, and I met a lot of very wise people who helped me to heal, and they were teaching me that the rape I had experienced, sorry if that's kind of heavy for our listeners, but what I had experienced was not my fault, and that I was not a bad person, and that I was not an icky person, and that the earth still loved me, and the spirits still loved me, and the creator still loved me, and they wanted me back on their team. They wanted me back in the saddle, so to speak, to start creating positive change. And that all of this drugs and all of this abuse that happened to me made me feel like such a horrible person. And so they were saying that, no, you're not a horrible person, and you're still worthy of fighting this fight, that's this good fight for all of creation, and that you're a worthy warrior, and we love you. We want you to get back on your horse and keep going. And aside from that, nothing any of these people did to you ever changed you or made you less of a woman. Like you're fine. They can touch your body, but they can never touch your spirit, and they haven't stopped you from doing what you came here to do. At that point, I also learned these teachings of how to hold. There's different words for it. There's Reiki, Chi, the Holy Spirit, Shka. My people call it the Yin, the sacred wind, this life force. Oh yeah, Yoda calls it the force, right? So there's this substance, there's this elemental life force that we can be a part of, and we can heal with, and we can heal through. And so I was learning how to hold this energy inside of me. And one of the things that my wise teachers told me was to truly hold the most potent life force within you and to let it breathe through you and emanate from you. It cannot be for money, it cannot be for fame, and it cannot be from fear. It is a selfless practice. It's a practice that's based on true compassion for something outside of yourself. It's not about your reputation. It's not about your bank account. It's about your people who are suffering right now and need your help. And so that really clicked with me, and that simple guidance, not for fame, not for money, no fear. That really transformed my life, because at the time, everything was about fame and money. I was a drug dealer, which is all about getting money and having a reputation, right? So I had to stop doing that right away. And I had to start thinking about, what is my life for? And so at that time, I kind of went to the opposite extreme where I didn't have a job for 3 years and I was just giving away my energy constantly. I remember doing all of my skills like graphic design, web design, just for free for people who needed it and for people who deserved it, whose causes were helping the world in some way. And I was also learning that it was really important to use my energy for social causes. So I started a festival for children because there was all this youth suicide going on in my town. So I was just on a roll, just churning out all of this love and writing poetry that was meant to help people get through their day, and writing music. And my music started to shift because all of a sudden it wasn't about, oh, look at me, I can play the guitar. It was more like, maybe this song will help someone in their darkest night. And boom, that transforms the creative process into something completely magical and beautiful and bigger than me. And so anyways, long story short, going through that process of what I called fearless generosity, where I had no job for 3 years, living out of my suitcase, just throwing myself into the world. And all the while, somehow, I always had food and I always had shelter, but I was very poor, to the point where a bowl of soup meant the world to me because I didn't know where the next one was coming from. And to the point where it was I only had 4 pairs of pants, 4 shirts, and a jacket. And I knew every article of clothing I had because I just didn't have very much of anything. And so I lived on the road. I traveled for 3 years. I just kind of went wherever felt like I was needed. The reason I stopped this experiment was because, honestly, in my attempts to be fearlessly generous and in my attempts to destroy my own greed, I ended up having kind of a negative relationship with money, where I became scared of it and I didn't like it, and I purposefully shut it out of my life. And I don't think that's necessary anymore. I think that if you have a job that is what Buddha says, right living, right, where you're kind of living in a good way and you're not hurting anyone, then it is okay to have some income. It's not a sin, it's not a horrible thing. I would appreciate a day when we don't have to rely on wage labor and we all take care of each other. That's my ultimate goal. But for the meantime, where I do need money to live, as of now, I started to give myself the permission to make income. And so things started to shift. Another big reason I stopped this experiment was because as a woman, a young woman as I was, it's kind of dangerous to be dependent on other people for your food and your shelter. I started to see self-sufficiency as a good thing and tell the difference between greed and self-sufficiency. And so that's kind of where I'm at now, is I have a day job now where I'm a graphic designer and a video producer for a nonprofit. I make my, weekly income. I also give talks here and there, and sometimes they pay me for that. I have a fellowship at the Center for Earth Ethics where they're helping me out. So I'm kind of in a place where I allow myself to have money. I still sell all my CDs and give 100% of the proceeds to whatever awesome nonprofit or group is in the area, and I still sell all my books. The proceeds go to the people. And so it's not that I'm not generous. I just I allow myself to receive enough income to cover my own bases. And then once that's covered, then it's output time and giving back to the community.
Did you get your answer to the question, what is my life for?
I did. I think it's always evolving, but the easy answer is that my life is for the betterment of all my relations. I was going to say humanity, but it extends beyond humanity, including the animals, the plants, the water, the clouds, the atmosphere, even the stars. and even the core of the earth. I'm related to all these things, and I'm a part of all these things, and I want to be a positive presence for all these things. And I have a blast doing it. It's really fun. It's a lot better than being like a depressed drug dealer who hates herself. But I think also, given a more nuanced answer, is that because I'm half Native American and half European, I am in this perfect position to try and heal the ethnic division and ethnic oppression that occurs between these groups. And so just a peacemaker, not just in verbal or philosophical terms, but in concrete terms. What does peace look like in this Turtle Island, as we call it? We don't call it America, we call it Turtle Island. How do we create that healing on this earth? And also, part of my prayer is to help my people redefine victory based on our ancestral ways, not on the colonizers' definitions. We're all given a gift, and my gift is my words and my songs. That's part of what my life is for, is to give speeches that give people a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of comfort, a little bit of deeper understanding, a little bit of self-love, and a little bit of healing. And if I can even just create one moment where they don't have fear, then boom, that creative life force can reach them, enter them, and the healing can start happening in their lives.
It's really interesting because normally in these Untangled episodes, we have the conversation around someone is in the corporate world and then they have this awakening moment and then they need to untangle themselves from that kind of life. But it's really interesting because you've come at it from the other way. So you really had consciously chosen not to be part of that system. But then there was a point where you did choose to go back. Can you take us to that moment?
I got a nice fancy job at Verizon corporate headquarters in Irvine, California, and was operating tribal relations for 16 of the western states of the United States and making tons of money. And I believed I could change the system by going into it. Almost like a secret agent, like I'm going to go into this world and I'm going to figure out how it works and I'm going to transform it and I'm going to help all the people inside see the light. And in a way I did. I had some pretty incredible moments at Verizon. Just picture 100 corporate executives standing in a circle praying and connecting with these deer hide prayer ties that I had made them. And my cubicle mates, I still hang out with them all the time, and I had a profound effect on their lives and on their practice and what they just being there for them as a human being, as a sister, as a niece, So I did grace that area, and I did make some forward motion, and I did change the way they interacted with indigenous tribes. And at the same time, I did eventually learn that my energy might have been better spent in other places. I was just one of tens of thousands of employees. And so what happened was it started to change me more quickly than I could change it. And I started flying all over the country all the time, business meetings, doing this, that, and that, counting my money. And I never became so fearful of not having enough money than when I was making all that money. I'm still trying to figure out what the psychology of that is, but I know I was deathly afraid of not having enough money all of a sudden that I was making all this money. Not only that, it was changing me in other ways to be at Verizon. Another way it was changing me was it was making me feel like an elite citizen. I remember feeling so much better than everyone else because I was making more money and sort of looking down on other people. And over time, it grew on me until I got to this point where I was like, how did I get here? How did I become this? I was on my way to Harvard Business School. I've always been a sort of a social justice oriented person, someone who simply wanted the world to be a better place. I was always having a hard time watching all the suffering go on all around me. And so I thought that capitalism was sort of the root of a lot of destruction of the earth and destruction of people. And so I thought if I went to Harvard Business School, I could transform the system from the inside out. And I would gain the respect of all these business people, and then they would all listen to me and change what they were doing. And so at a certain point, I talked to an elder about this idea. I talked to many people about this idea, and a lot of people are like, yeah, go for it. Good thinking. But my native elder said, you can change the system from the inside, or you can change the system from the outside, or you can just build a new system. And that was really profound for me, this idea of why am I trying to fix this broken car when at the end of the day I'm still driving a car that needs gasoline and is run by the capitalistic industrial complex. Why don't I just build a whole nother system that doesn't require a car, if that makes sense? Why don't I just make something new that's from scratch, that's from my own heart, that has no colonial restrictions, that doesn't live inside of the car's outer shell, but is completely flowered from my own imagination. And not just my imagination, but the imagination of my ancestors, who were incredibly sustainable, incredibly harmonious, socially speaking. So I didn't go to Harvard. That's sort of when things started to shift for me. And I went to University of New Mexico, which is much less prestigious by colonial standards. And I had all Native American professors there because New Mexico has a lot of tribes that are still thriving, a lot of indigenous nations that are still intact, indigenous languages that are intact, and it's an indigenous city. And for the first time in my life, first time in 26 years of schooling, I actually enjoyed learning. And what the professors were teaching me was making me come alive. And the readings I was reading were making me cry, tears of inspiration, tears of joy, tears of sorrow. And the topics that we were treating were actually engaging me in a way that I could see leveraging in the real world. So for the first time in my life, I was really enjoying school. And the program I took in University of New Mexico was American Indian education. So it was sort of this meta experience where I was studying the very thing that I was also at the same time experiencing personally, of like, wow, indigenous youth don't have a place to learn that actually feeds them. And we are buying into this lie that the colonial institution is the place to be and the place to go if we want power, if we want intelligence, if we want social status. Meanwhile, all of our elders are alone at home with all this wisdom and nobody to teach. And so the moral of the story is that I'm wanting to spend less time at Harvard and more time at Grandma's house, because I think that Harvard and the scientific Western tradition has gotten us into this mess that humanity is in. No offense, but that's how it happened. And I think that my people's traditions are valuable, they're not disposable, they're not inferior, and that they have the power and the potential to get humanity out of this mess. And so I've kind of turned a 180 and restored my faith in my people, in my ancestors, and in my traditional institutions.
I imagine a lot of people listening in and just feeling incredibly overwhelmed by that, because we are so entangled in the current system. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to imagine or envision a life where we are not part of that and are not slaves to it, I guess, mm-hmm. is the only way to describe it. Where do you even find the hope that that is possible?
During the time of slavery, as if that time ever ended, but more explicit slavery in the South of the United States, there was a woman named Harriet Tubman, and she was instrumental in operating this thing called the Underground Railroad. And the Underground Railroad is a metaphor for a long line of peoples who were helping enslaved people get free. And so it was basically a network of safe houses where these enslaved peoples could go and be safe and be transferred to the next safe house and the next and the next until they got out of the South. What I'm starting to see is that Western society are now the enslaved peoples, and they are slaves to capitalism. They are slaves. I should say I am too. Like, I can't, as much as I wish I could, I'm still not learned enough to truly live in a way that doesn't destroy everything around me. I'm starting to realize that indigenous peoples are that Harriet Tubman. Indigenous peoples are the ones who can help regenerate this Underground Railroad and get us out of these systems. And so the hope, where I find it, is to create models and disseminate them quickly as possible, because people are going to need a place to live where they can actually thrive. To your question, there's listeners where this is all we know. How are we going to break free when we don't know anything else? And of course, the answer to almost everything is prayer in my book. Like, pray about it and ask the stars to help you see the way out. And the stars will take you there. But it's hard to say, like in Europe, where the indigenous cultures are less intact. They are there, they're not just completely destroyed, but they're less intact. But to find those ways of moving, and if you can't find them, then that's where we as Native people step in and we say, okay, brothers and sisters, here's how we do it. Maybe that can give you some answers of how to do it where you are. But we as Native people, we need to be ready to share. Even though the world has tried to destroy us 1,000 times over, we need to have the forgiveness and the love to share our models with the world anyways. And to say, even though you tried to destroy us, we're going to try and help you now. Help ourselves and help everyone else. And to really be brave enough to share those models with the world.
Can you give us some examples of those models?
Well, I can only speak to Dene culture. And also although I'm not Lakota, I've spent a good deal of my life in that upbringing. And so I think I can speak to that a little bit as well. I mean, there's many, many, many facets of these cultures and many, many facets of various systems. But perhaps I'll focus on gender relations. Our cultures are very gendered, for better or worse. I know it doesn't meet the needs of the time where a lot of people are not gender conforming. But for whatever reason, these cultures are very, very gendered, in the sense that we had womanhood ceremonies and we had manhood ceremonies. And these ceremonies would affirm to these individuals that you are now a woman or you are now a man. And I think when we affirm that and we give them a healthy femininity, a healthy masculinity, then there's a lot less fishing around for ways to be a woman or ways to be a man. These rites of passage were really, really important in inculcating a kind of self-esteem and inculcating a kind of self-respect and even joy at who and what you are. And also inculcating at the same time all these valuable principles like generosity, tenacity, community-mindedness, courage. Well, those are the main ones that I was taught in my womanhood ceremony. And also it's very gendered in the sense that, at least in the Lakota practice, you have the sacred pipe, and there's two elements, the wooden stem, the long wooden stem, and the red pipestone bowl. And the stone is feminine and the stem is masculine. And it's said that when you bring these two things together in prayer and in respect and in commitment, you can give birth to creation in a healthy way. And so even our most sacred prayer instrument represents a healthy relationship between men and women. And this was given to us by White Buffalo Calf woman, I think it's 17 generations ago. She gave this to us to teach us how to have harmony. And this pipe has spread all over the world now. And it's not a pipe to get high, it's a pipe to get clear. And so what we smoke is willow bark, and it doesn't alter your mind in any way, shape, or form. But anyways, this gender relations, they say if that is in order, everything else falls into place. Because when the men and the women are stable, that creates a stable environment for the next generation. They say women being at the center is not about women, it's about everyone. In that process, you're actually creating a matrifocal society that's good for everyone. And they say that if you're able to put women at the center, not as in they're more important, but as in they are the root of everything, then you put life at the center. And now in our society, we're putting women to the side oftentimes and silencing them, or worse, abusing or exploiting them or hurting them. We see that the way we treat women has ripple effects on all of creation. When you disregard women, that society usually also disregards life itself. And so that's what we're seeing all around the planet, is life is starting to tatter and fray at the edges. Coral reefs are collapsing. Our atmosphere is going into a state of shock with the CO2 and methane emissions. All this stuff is, according to our traditions, is related to gender relations, funnily enough. When the men are secure in themselves, they don't need to find these ways to be men that are unhealthy. Like maybe if I have a tower with my name on it, or maybe if I have a Russian wife or 2 or 3, or maybe if I have a car, a nice, then I'll be a man. But if we have these manhood ceremonies that really help them be secure in their manhood, and then they don't have to go out looking for more. They already have it inside of them. The community has already affirmed it for them. And so there's a lot less greed. There's a lot less feeling like their manhood is defined by how many women they could sleep with, or how much land they own, or how many boats they have. But they have a security inside of them that says, I am good enough as I am.
So much, Lyla. I just wanted to close just by asking you, I know that there would be people who are listening and they are currently inside the corporate capitalist system. They know that they are here to contribute to change, and you've said I couldn't do it from the inside, but I'm wondering, for those people that do feel like they're on the inside right now, if you had any advice for them.
Some people are in corporate world because they need to take care of their family, and that's different than being in the corporate world because you want to make the world a better place. You can only go so far in making the world a better place through the vehicle of capitalism. At a certain point, we are just adding our body and our energy to a system that doesn't deserve us, that doesn't do our spirit and our potential justice. And that there are pathways and there are vehicles and there are windows out there that are worthy of our spirit and are worthy of our abilities. While you don't have to starve yourself and be broke like I did to make change, oftentimes there are ways to balance this need for income and this need for being a positive force in the world. And oftentimes that has to deal with putting less focus on our day job and more focus on our life's gift to humanity, not only today, but for generations to come. I think it's a question we can all ask ourselves, and I wish I had an easy answer for you and for everyone, but that's a question, and you must each go on your own quest. Which is a journey of seeking, a journey of prayer, a journey of discovery, a journey of hardship sometimes, because you have to rest in that unknowing, you have to rest in that uncertainty at times. But if you keep asking for the answer, if you keep moving forward, if you keep keeping your eyes peeled for the answer, then that's good, That's going to bring you to a good place. I would say that to ask ourselves what we're going to put our life towards. What is not only our life, but in more concrete terms, the joules of energy that we expend on a daily basis and the joules of energy that we consume on a daily basis, and where we put our body and what projects those joules contribute towards. Inside of every human being is immense potential. What are you going to spend that potential on? What is its direction? What is its scope? And what is its magnitude? what are you going to put yourself towards?
Thank you so much for listening. For more information on Lyla June Johnston and her work, head to alanahilbig.com/untangled38. And if you found this interview valuable, inspiring, or useful, I would be so grateful if you could take a couple of moments to share it with a friend. You can do this by email, on social media, tagging a friend, whatever platform feels right for you. By doing so, you help the message of Untangled to reach more women and men who need these stories. Have an amazing Christmas and New Year, and I'll see you on the 2018 flip side. Bye.